My fiancé insisted on an open relationship just as we were about to exchange vows, shattering the vision of our future together. I knew in that moment that compromise wasn't an option, so I canceled the wedding, refusing to settle for a love that wasn't fully committed. 2 weeks ago, just days before our wedding, she asked me to join her for therapy. She'd already been seeing a therapist on her own and wanted us to have a session together, a chance to be completely honest before tying the knot. Honestly, that request seemed odd to me since I assumed we were already open with each other, especially with the wedding only 2 weeks away. She was always protective about her therapy sessions, never really discussing them with me, and I'd never even met her therapist. So, being suddenly invited into that world felt off. The day finally arrived. I went to the session, keeping my phone on and recording, just in case. My fiancé was already there. After waiting for about 20 minutes, I was finally called in. The therapist greeted me warmly and shook my hand. We exchanged some small talk, and she remarked that I wasn't exactly the person my fiancé had described. I assumed that was meant as a compliment. Then she turned to my fiancé and said something like, "This may be harder than we thought." That immediately set off alarm bells, but I maintained my calm, wearing that awkward smile we all know too well in uncomfortable situations. The therapist launched into a brief monologue. As my fiancé held my hand, she explained that we live in a modern world and that my fiancé wanted a non-traditional marriage. I couldn't help but smile, though I was puzzled. At first, I thought she was talking about not sacrificing personal ambitions or her independence. But then it hit me. She was essentially saying that once married, she wanted the freedom to sleep with other men. She loved me, but she couldn't handle the thought of me doing the same, knowing I might be tempted by other women. I let them continue their rehearsed conversation without interruption. After they finished, I asked the therapist if she was licensed. When she confirmed that she was, I surprised her by saying, "Explain to my fiancé why we're not getting married and why we're ending this relationship right now." With that, I wished them luck and left the room. I was determined to report the therapist. I wasn't sure if it should be to her clinic or the appropriate licensing board, but I wanted her to be held accountable for her unprofessional conduct. Listening to the recording later, I still couldn't believe what I heard. Even if my fiancé had wanted an open marriage, my decision would have been the same. This wasn't a genuine relationship. It felt like a sham. I called off the wedding without any drama because I've always been an easygoing guy who avoids conflict. Some might think that means I'm a pushover, but after replaying that recording, I knew the therapist had already seen through the person my fiancé had painted. Now that the wedding is off, everyone's asking questions, and I'm not sure how to handle them. My ex is trying to do damage control, but I have the recording, and if she strays too far from the truth, I'm ready to share exactly what was said. I'm also fielding calls from family. My parents and relatives are eager for answers. I don't want them to think I was foolish for letting her steer things to this point, especially after she blatantly stated her desire to be with other men. Meanwhile, she's been bombarding my phone, my best friend's phone, even my brother's. We were even in the middle of applying for a house loan together, but I canceled everything and severed all financial ties. Her current defense is that during therapy, she revealed her insecurities about our past relationships. Apparently, I'd had more partners than she did. The therapist then suggested we level the playing field, regardless of the facts. Well, once I figure out how to file a proper complaint, she'll have to answer for that too. This post is mostly a rant, but I'd also like to know, how would you answer the questions from friends and family? My ex is doing her own spin on things, and while I have the recording, I'm still debating whether I should share it with those who are concerned. For now, she remains unaware that I've been documenting every word. A quick update. I just received confirmation at work that the journal I sent earlier was returned to my ex. I used our office courier service, and she had to sign a confirmation of receipt. Some people advised that reading it wouldn't help her take responsibility, and I'm inclined to agree. Jokes aside, the last 2 weeks have been wild. Last Monday, I discussed the whole situation with a lawyer at work. He looked at me as if I were joking, until I asked him if he wanted to listen to the recording. His response was a resounding, "Damn right." The next day, he pointed out that the therapist consistently used we in her language. We think, we talked about, we decided. Not once did she mention that my ex had asked for this, or that she was acting on her behalf. It was all presented as a joint decision. He also asked what my endgame was. Did I want to sue? I told him I wasn't interested in a lawsuit. I just wanted to report the situation to the proper authorities. We ended up writing 2 letters, one to the clinic where she works and one to the American Psychological Association, APA. By Wednesday, we confirmed she was accredited. Several coworkers got wind of the situation, including one of the case researchers who dug up online reviews and even found contacts for 2 of her former patients. It turned out the therapist had a trail of dissatisfied clients, and we reached out to them via social media. Once we explained the situation, both individuals were more than willing to share their own experiences, which were as troubling as mine. Our letters grew longer as we included their signed statements, my account of how my ex changed once therapy started, and a detailed description of my session. Last Friday, I had a meeting at my parents' house with her parents. More information surfaced during that discussion, which later became part of the report on the therapist. This week, we sent out our reports. The clinic called our office on Thursday morning, probably to verify that this wasn't a prank. We spoke with one of their lawyers over the phone, and after confirming the legitimacy of our claims, someone in the background muttered, "Well, crap." They assured us they were taking the matter seriously. A coworker speculated that the clinic might have received other complaints before, but never with such thorough documentation. Their response, along with our note about reporting the issue to the APA, seemed to have spurred a quick reaction. I'm not sure what the final outcome will be, and in many ways, I consider this chapter closed. However, after speaking with the other two individuals who had similar experiences with the therapist, I truly hope she's investigated thoroughly. She seems to have an agenda and has already wrecked other relationships. For the record, one of those affected was a woman. Then, last Friday, my parents called me to come over after work. When I arrived, I was surprised to see my ex and her parents waiting there too. The moment I saw their cars in my parents' driveway, all I wanted to do was run. That meeting was supposed to be on my terms, but she tried to take control of the situation. Needless to say, my ex was waiting for me outside, and despite everything, she looked very good. If there was ever a girl you'd want your parents to meet, she was the perfect example. She told me her parents had come by to see if we could sort things out, though they weren't really her parents. They either never got the full story or were fed a version they didn't believe. She carried a journal with her, explaining that she'd started writing in it before therapy and kept at it until that Friday morning, claiming that if I read it, everything would become clear. I told her, this isn't a book club. I was eager to step inside and start the chaos, but she asked if I could give her 10 minutes alone before facing her parents. As she kept handing me the journal, tears streamed down her face. Then my sister arrived, followed by my ex's sister. They were already there and came out to check on us. So I took the journal, went inside, greeted everyone, and left my ex tucked away in the most isolated part of my parents' huge garden, filled with trees and benches. She quit her job because the stress overwhelmed her and she had a breakdown that only escalated over time. She stopped seeing her original therapist, switched to one for work issues, but somehow our relationship became the main topic, the only thing the therapist seemed interested in. She never told her parents why she was my ex. Now she's with another therapist. I just listened as she shifted the conversation from herself to us, stating that I would control everything, managing finances, having access to all her devices, tracking her every move, and owning every property we acquired. She promised to do anything I asked in order to earn my trust back. In her messages over the past weeks, she listed even more conditions than I mentioned. I couldn't understand how she thought this would lead to a healthy life for either of us. I asked if she'd cheated, and she said she had the opportunity but never did. I believed her, but her words infuriated me. What does it mean to have the opportunity? If you're in a committed relationship, you shouldn't put yourself in a position where that's a possibility. It's like saying, I almost had the chance to kill someone today. Why phrase it like that, as if it were a good thing? That pretty much ended our 10-minute conversation, and she insisted we talk to our parents. So we did. I asked our sisters to leave us alone since it wasn't their business. My sister huffed and puffed, but I reminded her that a stone house endures hurricanes, something she clearly wasn't. I explained what had happened in the therapy session and my decision, without mentioning the recording because my ex had confirmed everything I said, which surprised me. Her father got teary, and it broke my heart. Her mother asked if this was really how she thought she'd been raised and demanded an explanation. My ex repeated her story. Stress at work, depression, a breakdown, a therapist obsessed with our relationship who convinced her I wanted an open relationship, that she might lose me if she didn't match my sexual experiences. How my reaction snapped her out of her slump. She quit her job and is now searching for something less stressful, ready to do anything to win me back. Eventually, she started crying again and mentioned the journal, saying it would explain everything, and that she wasn't really on board with the therapist's ideas but went along with them out of respect for authority. Our parents looked at me, and I said that I don't read someone's private journal unless they're a dead poet. A mistake. I meant that private journals usually become literature only if the writer is a visionary, often published after their death, hoping they'd understand I wasn't interested in reading her journal because it wouldn't change the past. The room filled with hostility as everyone looked at me as if I wished harm on my ex. I could practically taste the tension, so I reluctantly promised to read her journal. You win some, you lose some, and sometimes you lose a bit more when you choose the wrong words. My ex is now seeing a new therapist, an older guy with a white beard, kind of like Freud. She showed her parents' emails confirming her appointments. I looked him up online. Married, a frequent conference attendee, and an author of a few books available on Amazon. He seems respectable. Can you believe it? It all infuriated me a second time, as if our issues were just child's play and we, being kids, should just let the adults handle it. We're too young to control our own emotions or decide what betrayal is irreparable. I managed to reclaim some ground with my dead poet remark, and that's how the day ended. We've known each other for 9 years and been a couple for 5. Even if her behavior had valid reasons behind it, how do you just go back to what you once were? There was no simple reset. My view of her had fundamentally changed. I know a lot about her. I still find her incredibly attractive. Last Friday, she looked amazing, no denying it, but it all seemed calculated. Her hair styled just the way I liked it, that dress I picked out for her, the shoes I adored, and a trace of the perfume I had given her. The journal sits on my nightstand. I haven't read it, and probably never will. I did flip through it to check if it was indeed a year old, and the page folds, the fading ink on the first pages, all of it showed the passage of time. The pen was still attached, and its ink level matched how much I believed it had been used over the year. It wasn't a fake. Everything matched a year's worth of wear and tear. I see no benefit in reading it. It would only be a tool for manipulation. I doubt she intended it for that a year ago, but if her new therapist suggested sharing it with me, then I guess that's that. As for how I handle prying questions about why the wedding's off, we just couldn't agree on a solution. More or less, if her sister finds out, and that's likely because she's very close to their mother, everyone will learn the truth behind our parents' meeting next week. They want me to read the journal in hopes that it might help us start fresh, since we share so much history. They believe she'll get treatment and get better, that she's still the woman I fell in love with, despite not being well right now. My parents could see that I still love her, or I wouldn't have been so dramatic. Their words, not mine. I don't think I'll see them next Friday, but damn, she did look amazing. I want to thank the community for their support and advice. It helped me craft a plan concerning the therapist. Thank you to those who provided resources and suggestions. So what should I do with her journal? Return it, keep it, or read it 90 years from now? Update 2. The therapist is no longer with the clinic. It seems the main reason is related to the clinic being sued by someone else. Now, someone totally unrelated is suing the clinic. I don't have many details, but the therapist tried reaching out to Mel with no luck. I suspect she discovered my report on her and was after more information. Mel didn't respond. She was blocked, and her messages went unanswered. A little voice in my head tells me maybe it wasn't the smartest idea to file that report, as it might invite unwanted attention from those behind the lawsuit. Despite all this, I can't help but smile knowing the therapist is in trouble. For those who say I lack emotion, if this isn't proof enough, I don't know what will be. I hope you understand my sarcasm, Morel. Yet, things are far more complicated. I briefly mentioned in my earlier post about her journal that I decided to return it in a very clinical way. The courier from work brought the journal to her on Monday morning, and I included a letter explaining why I hadn't read it yet. In the end, it all came down to me not owning up to the situation. I felt that by giving me the journal, she was absolving herself of responsibility and putting the burden of finding answers on me. So, I decided to let it go. Right after I was told the journal had been returned, regret washed over me. Maybe I should have read it later that day. Later, Mela showed up at my workplace. She didn't cause a scene. She simply waited in the lobby, planning to speak with me after my workday ended. It wasn't long before I noticed her presence. I had a choice, either send her away or talk things over. We chose to talk, and our conversation felt like a blueprint for our relationship's collapse. First, there was the stress issue. I knew stress was a problem, but never grasped its full weight. In hindsight, when she began seeing a therapist for work-related stress, I should have been more aware. She always insisted everything was fine, so I believed her, even though she was having breakdowns at work that she hid from both me and her family. Next was the matter of fatherhood. She had experienced a miscarriage. She discovered she was a few weeks pregnant and wanted to make it special, planning to tell me about it. But a few days later, she started bleeding, and that was it. She never told me because she feared I'd see her as unworthy. She knew how badly I wanted to be a father, and she thought I'd believe she couldn't have children. That reasoning was completely absurd. Then, there were our friends. I never hid that we had friends in open relationships, and she had one in particular. About a year ago, this friend reached out to Mela and invited her to lunch. At that lunch, Mela started unloading her frustrations about her failed marriage. Her husband and I share something in common. We both had way more partners than our significant others. I had 26, and her husband had a staggering 70. Soon after their marriage, he insisted on an open relationship, leaving her miserable. According to that friend, Mela was headed for the same fate if she wasn't cautious with me. The friend even said I was showing the same signs as her husband did before they married. Another issue was realizing that those we love aren't always who we think they are. Our fathers, both academics and longtime friends, often attended events together with their wives. I met Mela at one of those events, accompanying my father to meet a professor who might help my career. Mela replaced her mother due to a scheduling conflict, or so she was told. It later turned out her parents were in turmoil because of her father's infidelity, a fact Mela only learned recently from her mother, after hearing concerns from that same friend. Her parents had always appeared to be the perfect couple, and although they patched things up, the illusion of a perfect marriage was shattered. Mix these 4 issues with a therapist of dubious intentions, and that's how you end a relationship. The therapist was eager to set up an open relationship for me. She confirmed everything the friend had mentioned. Men like me will never be satisfied with one woman and will eventually look for more. She proposed that the only way to curb my cheating was for Mela to sleep with other men until we even the numbers. Although I would be against it, if I truly loved Mela, I'd have to accept it. This layered plan was meant to correct my behavior, prove my love for her, and strengthen our bond. Clearly, the plan was doomed from the start, and I think that's exactly what the therapist expected. What she didn't predict was how quickly I'd react. That's my current hypothesis. For the rest of that week, we met daily, and she answered every question I had. One thing became clear. As ready as I was to end things, she was determined to fight for our relationship. By the end of the week, I had to leave for work in another city. What was supposed to be a 2-week trip stretched to 4 weeks because of additional billable hours. Before I left, I gave Mela a copy of the therapy session recording. She knew I had it. One of the first things I mentioned when she showed up that Monday. I believe listening to that recording shook her, as what she remembered was very different from what was actually said. I think she finally understood where all my actions and behavior toward her came from. While I was away, everyone back home knew about my trip, leaving me to my own devices for 3 weeks, a pretty awesome time. Several people in the comments even offered to grab a beer with me if I was ever in their city. I took up one of those offers and met another Redditor. Surprisingly, not a weirdo. He and his wife were genuinely wonderful. In the 4th week, Mela visited. We'd been in touch throughout my trip, mainly talking about us. One major issue needed settling. After our wedding, we were supposed to take a 2-week honeymoon trip to France. We couldn't do it right after the wedding, so it was booked for 3 months later. We had non-refundable plane tickets and hotel reservations, but we hadn't quite figured out us. In that 4th week, after more discussion, we agreed to go to France anyway, but as friends. I can already imagine some of you rolling your eyes at that last sentence. France was amazing. Visiting a country like that made me realize how medieval the US is in comparison. You can immediately spot Americans in a museum. I believe learning proper behavior abroad should be a mandatory course in our schools. We returned from France as a couple, not because Paris worked its magic, but because we both committed to rebuilding our relationship. We're not back to where we once were. There's work to be done. We've agreed on several things. Mela is searching for a less stressful job. We've decided to cut ties with our friends and open relationships, considering them toxic influences. We both love the name Mela, so our first daughter will carry that name. I'm still livid about the miscarriage secret. No one should hide something like that from their partner. We've also agreed to get a puppy and a kitten. Mela will continue with her current therapist for a while longer. When we eventually remarry, it'll be a small ceremony with just our immediate family, and maybe next we'll visit Italy. I know this isn't the dramatic update many were expecting. If you were looking for a tale of wrath, hate, or revenge, there are other versions of this story. From the start, I never hated Mela. My actions were simply self-preservation when her actions suggested she wanted something different from what I believed we had agreed upon. For those worried about her mental health, there's no need to fret. Once the influence of her therapist faded, she returned to her usual self, more or less. It's hard not to change after such events, but she's doing very well. You might remember she offered me full control over our finances, her location, and all her devices. Although I wasn't interested in that lifestyle, it was her way of trying everything to keep the conversation going. We both agree that our devices and finances should remain shared, as always. Thank you to everyone who has reached out in the comments and private messages. I've received valuable advice from many of you, and I'll always be grateful. Writing these posts and interacting with you has been incredibly therapeutic, a much-needed pressure release.